A very good evening to you all and welcome to Africa Speaks live on Pan-African television. I am your host Rashida Abubakar. Tonight, we turn our attention to a challenge touching nearly every corner of the continent, the struggle to keep the lights on. Across Africa, millions of people continue to contend with unreliable electricity, raising energy demands and difficult questions about who should provide one of society's most essential services. So tonight, we go beyond blackouts and tariffs. We explore the deep issues shaping the continent's energy future, hear from labor movements, examine developments from Burkina Faso, and look back at the defining moments in Mozambique's history. Stay with us, there's a lot to unpack. Let's begin with our Spotlight segment with Danie Otu Asante. For decades, electricity has been viewed as more than a utility. It is a lifeblood of economic growth, healthcare, education, and industrial development. Yet, across Africa, access to stable and affordable power remains elusive, from rolling blackouts in Southern Africa to persistent supply shortage in West Africa. The continent continues to grapple with aging infrastructure, rising population, and growing demand for energy. The consequences are felt everywhere. Small businesses struggle to stay afloat, hospitals rely on generators, students study by candlelight, and manufacturers face mounting production costs. At the same time, Africa possesses immense potential, abundant sunshine, natural gas reserves, and emerging renewable technologies offered opportunities to reshape the continent's energy landscape. One question remains at the center of the debate. How can Africa guarantee energy security while ensuring that electricity remains affordable and accessible to all? Tonight, we take a closer look.
Welcome to the Spotlight segment. Now, across Africa, millions of people wake up each day without reliable electricity. Businesses shut down their doors during power cuts, students struggle to study after dark, hospitals run essential services, and the strained energy poverty has become a barrier to development itself. Yet, Africa sits on enormous reserves of oil, gas, hydro, solar, and wind. So we have to ask a simple question. Why does a continent this rich in energy still face such severe electricity shortages? According to the International Energy Agency, around 600 million Africans, nearly 2 in every 5, still live without access to electricity. More than 4/5 of the world's unconnected population lives on this continent, and this is even though Africa holds 60% of the world's best solar resources, but barely have 1% of the world's installed solar panels. Only a tenth of its hydropower has even been used. So, the resources are not the problem. The question is, who controls them and who they are made to serve? This question ran across the generation and distribution. It is a story of corruption and policy failure. It is a story of corruption and policy failure, the role of private and foreign players. Many African countries do generate less power than they need, but generation alone is not the crisis. Weak transmission, poor maintenance, mounting debt, and policy built around profits rather than public need have all played their part. Much of that was designed from the 1980s onward. The IMF and the World Bank pressed African governments to restructure their power sectors. National power companies were broken up, generation was privatized, and tariff structure became extremely unfriendly to the people. These international agencies claimed that all of this would improve efficiency, but that promise was never fulfilled. When electricity is treated first as a commodity, companies chase the profitable urban market, while rural and poorer communities are left in the dark. The results repeatedly have seen higher bills without universal access. African governments need to prioritize large-scale public investment in generation, transmission and distribution, and measures that improves accountability and continent-wide grids, as well as renewables. However, most often than not, response to governments to energy crisis has been raising tariffs or privatization. This tendency has become worse since the US and Israeli war on Iran began. Recently in Ghana and South Africa, we have seen trade unions standing in the forefront of opposing bids to privatize the power sector in protecting state-owned power firms. This strong stance by the unions show the way forward for all of us. We must ensure that the decision-making in this sector, which is so vital for all of us, remains in the hands of the people. Only then can we begin to address the energy poverty facing the continent. This tendency has become worse since the US and Israeli war on Iran began. Recently in Ghana and South Africa, we have seen trade unions standing in the forefront of the opposing bids to privatize the power sector and protect state-owned power firms. This strong stance by the unions show the way forward for all of us. We must ensure the decision-making in this sector, which is so vital for all of us, remain in the hands of the people. Only then can we begin to address the energy poverty facing the continent. Only then can our schools and hospitals, our villages and cities truly see equitable and just development. This has been the Spotlight segment on Africa Space with me, Danie Otu Asante.
To help us understand the different approaches being pursued across the continent, we bring in our experts on the matter. A few issues generate as much debate as the question of electricity privatization. Supporters argued that greater private sector participation can attract investment, improve sufficiency, and modernize aging infrastructure. Critics, however, cautioned that electricity is too fundamental to everyday life to be treated solely on commercial commodity. The challenge, many argue, lies not simply in choosing between public or private ownership, but in finding models that deliver reliable power while safeguarding the interests of the citizens. Let's hear from them. A very good evening to you, Comrade Nyame, and thank you very much for joining us here on Expert Speaks. Today we are talking about the privatization of the energy sector. First of all, I would want to take your view on the recent energy sector in Ghana. How do you view it?
Thank you very much, and warm greetings to your viewers and listeners, and warm greetings to you at the studio.
Okay.
So the performance of the energy sector in the past few months or past period has been a little, there has been some significant improvement compared with what we were going through in the previous periods. As I said, relatively power has been stable, and if there's any issue at all, it's limited. Most of the power outages as a result of plant maintenance, and until that of a VRA incident occurred, we're having some relatively stable power, and the operations have been going on smoothly. In the sector of ECG, you have seen that performance has been so tremendous and significant due to the collaboration between the management of ECG and the workers of ECG. There has been that collaboration. We are all trying to see how best we can help turn around the situation of ECG. Having raised a concern about how the organization is being run, and we had a permission of the Honorable Minister that the management together with the workers should come together and see how best we can bring the transformation agenda on board. So I can say as we speak now, power has been relatively stable. As I said earlier on, and things are moving on smoothly. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about the latest move to introduce private sector into the participation of electricity companies. What exactly are the proposal being made, and why is the PUWU opposing it?
Well, Ghana has gone through various phases of private sector participation. some of the issues to come, say the private sector participation, but to be outright privatization. And the target have been state institutions. And those state institutions that were diversified, there was no any significant turnaround, majority of them. You can recall Ghana Water Company Limited that went into the PSP and the AVRL, where staff lost their jobs, and others, telecommunication, other state institutions that went, people lost their jobs, and we've not seen any significant improvement. So in the coming into office of His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama, when he started hitting at the start of the energy, that's a sector, so we became a little cautious and became apprehensive, knowing that this institution can be run by Ghanaians themselves and not necessarily selling it. We heard instances where they said they were just going to sell out the organization. It was a cause for worry for us. Thank God we raised concern that the government also actually engages. As I speak now, we are in negotiation. We have stated our position as a pool and the TUC why energy sector should not be privatized. So I can walk you through, ECG is going through, there's some element of private sector operation in ECG. So if you speak of the meter reader, those who read the meter, we call them franchise officers. They are private sector players who work and pay them. Those who are involved in meter installation, that's new service connection, you give it to the private sector. So they will go and do the new service connection, bring their bill for us to pay. And even when we talk about the management of the billing system, so this is also in the hands of the private sector. So that's a level of operation of the private sector. So when government says they want to privatize, it's just a sellout. That's which we say that there are ramifications for privatizing a state institution. That's why the pool, for that matter, workers of ECG are actually also, and we are giving government alternative to this move.
But which forces do you think are behind these moves?
Yeah, so we could not pinpoint any force, but as you can recall, at several meetings where we attend on the sideline, we see the infiltration of the Bretton Woods institution, the IMF and World Bank. Is it not interesting for you to see that after Ghana has come out of the IMF, they say they are staying back to do what? You know, it's very interesting, and we have stated our position on that. That look, we have come to an agreement. Agreement has ended. Say you are staying back, and I know that the IMF intention of staying back is to make sure that they send ECG into private sector, and you shall stay again, time and again, say that TUC, Public Utility Workers Union, Public Services Workers Union, and our other allied organizations are opposed to PSP and privatization. Because you know that the Ghanaians have the capacity to run this state institution, and then they should not come and meddle their affairs, themselves into the affairs of this state institution. They should rather let us put in structures that will let ECG perform its core mandate.
Let me chip in this quickly. What risks do you think the privatization pose to workers, consumers, and national development at large?
You can recall that all private sector operation, privatization has brought in a lot of risk, especially when it comes to the labor front. Workers have lost their jobs. As I was saying, Ghana Water Company, 4,000 staff were reduced to close to 2,000. So they were staff were downsized. What about Ghana Telecom? There are other organizations that I would not like to mention, and that's unemployment. Already, unemployment is a security issue, a matter. So I don't even know why a government that is a social democratic, we should actually go to this Bretton Woods institution and allow our workers to go and stay at home, lose their job. when the issue of private sector participation in Ghana Water started, they said it was redeployment. There were no staff was redeployed. All staff were, even there was any redeployment, they were redeployed to their homes. And the compensation they paid could not keep them. If I want to recall, a lot of the staff lost their job just within 2 years, and lost their life within 2 years after losing their jobs. So it is not something that we should actually, it is something that we should not even contemplate. We should rather think of putting in control that will let people have more jobs. As we speak now, government intends to increase employment. And I just want to use an example of a PDS. When PDS came, they increased tariff astronomically and nobody spoke. They were doing their own thing. So this ECG, NETCO should be in the House of Government. So government, it should be, it's a state entity, it should remain a state entity. So we'll find ways and means of sustaining it as a public sector entity.
Thank you very much, Comrade Timothy Nyame, for doing this with us. And it was such an insightful conversation, and we are glad to have you here on Expert Speak.
So government, it should be,
Thank you for joining us here on Africa Speaks on Pan-African Television. I'm honored to do this with you. Today, we'll be talking about the privatization of the energy sector in South Africa. But first of all, can you please tell us a little bit about the current state of the energy sector in South Africa?
Well, the current state has drastically changed since the new President Ramaphosa, has took over. In fact, it is not something new. It is a project that began in the late 90s, under President Mbeki, where state-owned, companies were auctioned. Today, they are dominated by the private sector, and those that are still in the hands of a state, some of them are under business rescue. So in essence, what is happening is that since 2019, there has been a policy, reforms, particularly targeting the reforms in the energy sector, where they create an impression that if we introduce competition, the price of electricity will go down, will drive efficiencies. And from where we are standing, that is an illusion, because in America, for an example, there was a study which was done, which would have assessed, the impact of those reforms. And they came to the conclusion that all that was sold to the public, it was just an illusion. The prices of electricity didn't go down, although efficiencies in some pockets were achieved, but it does not mean they were driven primarily by the reforms. So to come back to South Africa, currently what we're experiencing, there is a strong push to take over the transmission division assets, into a new state-owned, apparently, it is a state-owned company, but when we saw the report this week, that company, it appears it is on paper that it will be state-owned. They are pushing for minority shareholding on the part of government. It will be dominated by the private sector. Now, what will that company do? That company will own the transmission lines, they will own the transmission substations, they will be the system operator, they will be the market operator, they will be the central purchasing agents. So in fact, it is the heartbeat of Eskom. They are the ones that are going to dictate what sort of generation capacity must come, when, at what price. So as things stand, it is looking very bad on the Eskom side, because the transmission business has been the one that has been profitable to an extent that when you look into the financial sustainability of Eskom, it is going to deteriorate as a result of the president pronouncement. In fact, it was the president pronouncement in the State of the Nation address where he made it clear that these assets must be owned and controlled by the new entity. But when you look at the policy did not mention that. The policy said we need to separate transmission, generation, division, and also I think it was transmission, distribution, and generation, so that they can compete amongst themselves. But what we're witnessing now, it is not what was envisaged, in the policy. Basically, we are hollowing out the assets that used to be owned by the state into some few private individuals that will be owning them. So when you look from a financial sustainability point of view, ESCOM will be worst off. Just recently, I think in the beginning of this month, Moody's, which have issued, an update on the credit rating, and they raised exactly the same issue, that this thing, it is complex, it is going to worsen ESCOM financial sustainability. To an extent, they didn't advise, the assets to be taken away into the new entity. Basically, they would have campaigned for the assets to remain within ESCOM. As things stand, those assets are under the new transmission company called, the National Transmission Company of South Africa, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of ESCOM. So in terms of reporting, when we consolidate the financial statements, they report under ESCOM. For an example, when the financial statements were released, last year for the financial year 2025, it is the only business that was profitable. To an extent, without that performance of a transmission division, ESCOM would have made a loss, but as a result of the consolidation between the three separate divisions, ESCOM was able to make 16 billion profit. So as things then, there is a strong push for that entity to come into effect by next year. And what is very shocking, World Bank is sitting in the task team advising government on how they should move forward. Now we are asking ourselves, who invited World Bank, into that task team? Because from where we are standing, this should be a discussion between ESCOM, and the government. And we know World Bank, they are the ones who've been sponsoring this idea that if you were to introduce competition, you are going to reduce the price of electricity and you are going to drive efficiencies. But honestly speaking, that has not happened, because the private sector, particularly on the generation side, it is one of the reasons the price of electricity in South Africa has become so expensive. Like if you look from 2019, the price of electricity has increased dramatically to almost 3 times, from 89 cents per kilowatt hour to R2.40 per kilowatt hour. And when you dig deep as to what is the driving factor, it is the independent power producers. And now the move to establish the new entity, it is about accelerating now the new private sector in terms of building the transmission lines. It is called the independent transmission projects. That is the whole agenda, behind now this rush move to take over transmission division. Accelerating now the new.
You are still watching Africa Speaks on Pan-Africa Television. In Voices on the Ground, we head to Nigeria. More than a decade after the privatization of much of the country's electricity sector, debate continues whether the reforms have delivered on their promises. For workers and ordinary citizens, the issue goes beyond economics. It is about access, accountability, and whether essential services are meeting the needs of the people they are meant to serve. As governments across Africa continue to search for solutions on their energy challenges, Nigeria's experiences offer important lessons on the opportunities and complexities involved in reforming the power sector. Let's hear from Nigeria Labour Congress. And complexities in
I am from the electricity sector and from Kano Electricity Distribution Company, and presently the commercial manager of the region where I serve. So for Nigeria, we actually have 3 chains of the electricity chain. is categorized into 3 sectors. So we have the generation company, which we ascribe as the GenCos. We have the transmission company, and also the distribution company, which we refer to as DISCOs. So generation company are those who generate the electricity. And then really down to the transmission company, where they solemnly just transmit that energy down to the distribution company. And the distribution company are those who actually serve the citizens. The generation company is being privatized, as well as the distribution company. Later, I think it was late last year, that the government also partially privatized the transmission company. Transmission company was fully owned by the government, but later on, sometime around last year, it was privatized. Privatized partially. So we have a segment that is owned by the government, and then another segment in the transmission company that is owned by a public sector. In the distribution company, there are some certain percentage that is being owned by the government and the private sector. So 60% is being owned by the private sector, while the public sector owns 40%. Actually, the increase in tariff relatively has affected the masses, the workers, citizens, small-scale businesses in a negative way. Because once you have increase in tariff, every other thing, especially the consumers, are being subjected to a lot of, how do I now explain it to you? A lot of pressure. We battle a lot of issues in Nigeria: insecurity issues, power distortion, no good. There are no better working environment for workers. See, just a whole lot that I cannot list for now. So when an ordinary man who is striving to struggle with just a 70,000 naira minimum wage in Nigeria is being bombarded by frequent increase in electricity tariff. Now, tell me, somebody back then in those days, we have just a one kilowatt was being equivalent to just 2 naira. But as we have it now in Nigeria, a band A customer, one tariff is equivalent to 209 naira. So you can see the increase in tariff. Now, somebody who is managing a business, a small-scale business, and he has already, programmed himself on what particular amount he is to per for electricity, probably buying a unit on his meter. He has already budgeted 2,000 naira per month. And then you have this increase of over 40%, 30%, so on and so forth. So you see, he is constantly rebudgeting. And at the end of the day, he might just feel, oh, no, he cannot continue with this because there is no life without electricity. Nobody can succeed, or a community cannot grow and function well without electricity. So those who depend on it, especially the small-scale entrepreneurs, they find it difficult. For example, those who just manage to sell local drinks. We have Zobo drink, we call it the hibiscus drink, tamarind drink. They solemnly depend on electricity. You understand? So, and they again, in whatever way, whoever is doing business, you have to manage. It should be cost reflective. You should have what you know as what you keep as your savings, and then what you have as your capital to rerun the business. But unfortunately, this increase in tariff is just making things more difficult for them, because from what they have already budgeted as their savings, they, at the end of the day, withdraw those savings to buy more of the electricity. So you see, a lot of businesses have crumpled. I'm in Kano State, and my state is actually, the motto of my state is a state of commerce. You would see that Kano is last, like 2 decades ago, this state was booming because we had a lot of people coming in. We had a lot of investors, a lot of factories, producers are just, in fact, this is their domain. But now you have a lot of companies that are not even functioning because of such kind of problems that we have. Electricity is not there, it's not forthcoming. And then even the little that we have, the government is bombarding us with increase in tariff that is constant and inconsiderable. So for this, yes, increase in tariff actually affects workers and citizens in a negative way. Privatization, I think, of the distribution company took place around September 2013. Yeah, so after that year, we have had consistent increase in tariff within the years from 2013 to date. The president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, in person of Comrade Joe Ajero, actually is the General Secretary of the National Union of Electricity Employees. So way back before him becoming the president of the NLC, he fought with all his might during the privatization. But unfortunately, when the government is hell-bent on doing something that it feels is for the good of the citizens, they will regardless continue with their intentions. And so after the privatization of this sector, the NLC, in its power, had fought the government. I think the last press release, in fact, there is no year or a quarter of a year that passes without the NLC, engaging the government through press releases, granting press requests from journalists, and including print media. So I have the latest one, which the NLC published in most of the daily newspapers in Nigeria on the 16th of February this year. And also a press conference was granted on the 15th of February this year. The theme was tagged Decade of Darkness, a decade of darkness. So NLC had fought in its power to make sure that they, reverse the electricity sector privatization. So you can check online and see a lot of publications, a lot of press conferences, a lot of we had protests. The National Union of Electricity Employees organized protests in the whole 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria, pressing on the government to reverse the privatization of the electricity sector. So they have done very well, and we hope to continue until our demands are met.
Those were some insightful conversations, and now to our dispatches, where we connect developments shaping the continent and beyond. First, we head to the world of sports with Nicholas. From latest football headlines to standout performances and stories making waves across the continent, Nicholas brings us the developments keeping Africa sports fans talking.
Thank you for having me to the show. Glad to join you and have this discussion on the World Cup. And Africa is having mixed results, but also very good performances from different teams that are representing us. This is the first World Cup that we have 10 teams representing Africa. For the most part, it has been four teams that have been representing Africa. And with this huge number, of course, the results vary. We have teams that are performing very well, like Morocco. Ghana just drew with England yesterday. Egypt recently won. You have South Africa also, and other teams that been performing well. Um, the most surprising performance will have to come from the Cape Verde team, and this has shocked many people and also surprised even those within the continent and outside the continent. They drew with Uruguay, they drew with Spain, earning 2 points in their group, and they stand a huge chance in qualifying. And it's a huge story with how it has happened. The goalkeeper for Cape Verde has been the most outstanding player for that team at the age of 40, which also breaks the record. He was the man of the match. And we have seen his story going around on his background. And we recently saw that his mother was able to join him for this World Cup. He had wanted his mother to join previously, but the cost to the United States was too high, and he did not join. And that is another topic that has defined this World Cup 2026. The high cost in ticket prices, the high cost in accessing these matches, and also visa issues has hindered a lot of players and fans to access this World Cup. But right now we are heading to the best 32 teams, and African teams stand a chance in qualifying further into this tournament, and we hope it can go further. Even though we have had some disappointments in other teams like Senegal, that people had high expectations, but definitely there are other teams that are doing well. Hakimi from Morocco also broke a record with this World Cup. And so, yeah, it's turning out to be well. If 9 out of 10 teams survive for the coming knockout stages, we stand a chance to go even further in the tournament. What happened when the tournament was starting? One of the referees from Africa, and particularly from Somali, the best referee considered by CAF in the year 2025, was denied entry into the United States. This is after he had his visa already and diplomatic passport, I believe, but he was denied entry to the United States. This, of course, did not sit well with many people around the world, many lovers of the game, and many people, of course, within the continent. Actually, when he returned back to Somali, he was received very well. He was received, with praise, the solidarity from the continent, because this was considered very unfair. Someone who had qualified on merit and hard work was being turned down because of geopolitics decisions. You remember that United States has designated Somalia as one of those countries that it has banned in giving visas, and so many people believe this was the reason why the referee Omar was denied entry to the United States and to officiate in the World Cup. He would have been the first Somali referee ever to officiate the World Cup, but he would also been one of the few African referees to participate in the World Cup. There are very few referees that participate in the World Cup, or any other officials from FIFA within the continent that are part of this tournament. So it was a huge deal, for I know for him personally, but for the continent also symbolically, it would have meant something great. But that has defined much part of this tournament. Ivory Coast fans are not able to go to the World Cup. Fans for Congo. Congo is also performing very well, and having mixed results, of course, but majority of their fans that had been fronted by their federations were denied. Were denied visas. And also Senegal was the same case. And football, like any other sports, fans play a major role. Fans are the heart, are the core of football or soccer, especially for the morale and the support that they extend to the players in the field. And I will imagine how difficult it will be to play in a stadium as huge as these stadiums are, over 60,000 capacity, and you don't have your fans supporting. And despite that, still play decent football and come up with decent results. So that has been the resilience we have seen from all those teams, and this is something you can even extend to a team like Iran. Now, Iran also surprised many people in the tournament, like Cape Verde from the continent. Of course, you'll know the kind of geopolitical tensions on the war on Iran that has also defined their participation in this tournament. Iran is currently staying in Mexico, and after every game they play in the United States, they have 2 hours to leave and go back to Mexico. Definitely, that team has no enough time to take rest and recover for the other matches. But surprisingly, 2 matches they have drew. 2 matches they have shown great strength and resilience. And if they continue that performance, definitely they are going to qualify for the knockout stages. And that, of course, is a very interesting story, a very captivating story based on what they have faced. Iran staff, part of their staff, coaches, were not allowed to enter this tournament. South Africa officials and were not allowed to enter this tournament. They were denied visas. You'll have a team like Senegal that had oversearched during their entry to the World Cup, and that was very embarrassing and humiliating. But again, this has not stopped these teams from showing up on the pitch and performing very well, even after the disappointment of many of them, including the referee. And this is something that FIFA itself has not come out very well in terms of its image. It should have shown a lot of support to these teams outrightly, because this is a global tournament that sometimes goes beyond politics, sometimes goes beyond geopolitical tensions. FIFA should come out as a neutral body, but it's not. We know that as an institutional body for football, it has also a lot of controversy, a lot of scandals, um, a lot of corruption, and so this has defined the tournament. Nevertheless, if teams keep showing up to this to the field, definitely there are stories that will keep coming out, because the nature of football has a lot of joy. It brings out a lot to talk about. Great performances will still take place, and they are happening. Also this week, Messi broke the record as is the leading top scorer for for World Cup as a player who has participated in several matches. So it will continue to be defining despite those challenges. But those challenges and some of those things that have defined the tournament will be remembered for a while, and will define how this goes even beyond the World Cup 2026. I'm curious to know how the next tournament will happen and how it will be carried out if this is the precedent that has been set on this tournament.
To give meaning to the United Nations resolution, we must refuse to allow it to become a ceremonial document. The resolution must not be buried in archives, cited once a year and then forgotten. It must become the foundation of an international program of action. It must give strength to African governments, Caribbean governments, diasporan communities, legal scholars, activists, and institutions that have long insisted that the world cannot be reconciled with injustice while refusing repair. Dear friends, it is in this context that I find the participation of the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, in this meeting as totally unacceptable. This should not be a forum for hollow expressions of sympathy and the propaganda of the perpetrators of the crimes for which we demand and seek repair. Our first task is institutional. Africa and the African diaspora need a permanent coordinated reparations mechanism. This should include the African Union, CARICOM, African states, diaspora organizations, legal experts, historians, economists, cultural workers, and youth movements. Such a body must not be symbolic. It must have a clear mandate to research, document, advocate, negotiate, monitor progress. It must build a unified African and diasporan position capable of engaging the United Nations, former slave trading states, international courts, financial institutions, universities, churches, corporations, and museums. The second task is legal and diplomatic. The resolution creates political momentum, but that momentum must be organized. We need serious legal research into claims against states, companies, monarchies, banks, insurance firms, religious bodies, universities, and other institutions that participated in or profited from the enslavement and colonial exploitation of the African people.
Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, authorities have announced the adaptation of the term Comrade as an official form of administrative address. The move reflects the country's evolving political identity, and it emphasizes on values of equality, solidarity, and collective responsibilities. Supporters view the decision as a reaffirmation of national unity, a break from inherited colonial convention, while observers say it represents another chapter of the country's broader effort to redefine institution and public culture. Whatever one's perspective is, language has always been more than words. It carries history, identity, and ideas society choose to embrace. And now to our word of the day segment. Today's word is comrade. Traditionally, the word refers to companion, colleague, or fellow member of a shared cause or community. Throughout history, it has been used in political movements, labor organizations, and liberational struggles to emphasize equality and solidarity among the people. Across Africa, the term carries different meaning depending on context. For some, It evokes memories of anti-colonial struggles and movements for social justice. For others, it signifies fellowship and shared purpose. Whatever their interpretation, one thing remains clear. Words often tell stories about society that use them. Let's have a listen.
Welcome to Africa Speaks. I am Fauzia Zila Seidu, and this is Word of the Day. Always excited to bring you a new word to spice up every week edition. Well, every day we use words to address each other. Words like say, boss, madam, your excellency. There's one thing common to each of these words. They make it clear who stands above and who stands below. They make it clear who has power and who does not. But there's one word built to do the opposite. Comrade. Comrade is not just a friendly greeting. It is a claim. It says, you and I stand on the same ground, in the same struggle as equals. The political use of the word comrade began after the French Revolution. As workers' movement and socialist movement grew, it symbolized unity in struggle. In a world of harsh divisions, brutal colonialism and apartheid, the word comrade stood for resistance, solidarity, and the truth that we are one people. From the factory floor to every fight against the colonizers, the word comrade was a guiding light. It was a way to recognize a fellow fighter. It bridged differences in language, culture, and religion. When the fighters of Amilcar Cabral, PAIGC of Frelimo, of the ANC called one another comrade, they were rejecting the colonizers' language, the language of master and servant, the official and the subject. Why are we talking about this all today? Is it because the word comrade is not history? A few months ago, the government of Burkina Faso ordered that across every ministry and every official speech, people will address one another not as Monsieur or Your Excellency, but as comrade. This step brought back a tradition from the time of Thomas Sankara, who was determined that no official could stand above the very people they serve. Sankara understood that you can't build equality while you speak the language of rank. Today, under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's government is following a similar path. It is declaring which tradition it belongs to and which has broken but. This is why language is never neutral. Colonialism and capitalism understands that. Exploitation is dressed up in language. Socialists like Cuban revolutionary Fidel Castro understood this too, which is why he talked about the battle of ideas. It is the struggle over the very words through which people understand their own lives. Comrade is one of those words. So when you use it knowing what it means. Comrade is not nostalgia. It is a standard. It reminds you that the people around you are not your competitors, but your co-fighters, your comrades in struggle. And that's another way of living together can be built and is built every day. I am Fauzia Zila Seidu, and comrade has been the word of the week. See you same time next week.
And as always, we close with history, a long view that helps us understand the present. Tonight, we mark the independence anniversary of Mozambique. On the 25th June 1975, Mozambique officially gained independence from Portuguese colonial rule after years of armed struggle led by Mozambique's Liberation Front. Let's take a look.
On the 25th of June, 1975, at Machava Stadium outside Maputo, the Portuguese flag came down and Samora Machel proclaimed the People's Republic of Mozambique. After nearly 5 centuries of Portuguese rule and 10 years of armed struggle, independence arrived with a demand that was simple and dangerous. Power must pass to the people who had fought for it. But that freedom was the product of years of toil and sacrifice by Frelimo, the Mozambique Liberation Front, formed in Dar es Salaam in 1962 from nationalist organizations in exile. Its first president was Eduardo Madlin. the Mozambican anthropologist assassinated by a parcel bomb in Tanzania in 1969. Samora Machel then led the movement through the last years of war. On the 25th of September 1964, Frelimo opened the armed struggle at Chai in Cabo Delgado and built its base across the northern countryside. It fought a colonial system that had hardened Portuguese trading posts into forced labor, plantation, settler privilege, and military rule. In the liberated zones, Frelimo organized schools, clinics, political education, and people assemblies. When a new era dawned in 1975, the people of Mozambique and Frelimo were clear about their goals. They sought to build a people's democratic state and liquidate the exploitation of man by man. The new state proclaimed its solidarity with national liberation movements in Africa and socialist states across the world in their struggle against imperialism. These were not jetty platitudes. Mozambique's victory changed the balance of forces in South Africa. Machel's movement nationalized land, health, and education, and placed the new republic in the camps of African liberation and non-alignment. Maputo became a rare base for those still fighting white minority rule. The ANC against apartheid South Africa and Zanla against Rhodesia. Mozambique showed that independence could forge a state that faced down enormous pressure and tried to reorganize society around workers, peasants, and national sovereignty. The journey, however, was not smooth. Rhodesia first backed Renamo, and apartheid South Africa later turned into a proxy war against Frelimo. From 1977 to 1992, the war destroyed roads, schools, clinics, farms, and families. More than 1 million Mozambicans were killed or died from war-related famine, and millions more were displaced. Machel himself died in a plane crash in 1986, in circumstances many Mozambicans still do not regard as settled. The revolution survived, but the country that emerged was weakened by war, debt, and structural adjustment. Over 50 years after independence, the promise and potential remain unfulfilled. In Cabo Delgado, where Frelimo began the armed struggle, one of Africa's largest gas projects is led by Total Energies and secured by foreign-backed military deployments, while local communities face displacement, insecurities, and little control over the value extracted around them. Mozambique also still carries the memory of hidden debt scandal, in which more than $2 billion was secretly borrowed in the country's name. After the disputed 2024 elections, there was an outburst of anger and allegations of electoral fraud, leading to large number of deaths. For Mozambicans, and as for so many of us in Africa, the pledge of 1975 remained unfinished. Independence must mean control over land, resources, budgets, and the future.
And that brings us to the end of this week's Africa Speak. Tonight, we examine Africa's energy challenge, explore the debate surrounding electricity reforms, heard from perspective from labor movement, followed developments from Burkina Faso, and reflected on Mozambique's journey to independence. Until we meet again, keep questioning, keep learning, and continue engaging with the stories shaping the continent and the world around us. Because Africa must speak, Africa must be heard. I am Rashida Abubakar. Enjoy the rest of our programs.